Ready.
Let's go.
The Flash is the newest and one of the last films in the DCEU, which of course stands for Deceased Crapshoot of an Extended Universe. Yeah, you all know I don't like the DCEU. They've had very few films that are even considered passable, and they did have Shazam! Fury of the Gods earlier this year, which was a decent film, but was nothing more than that. Decent. And I've made many videos on the trailers and everything, and other reports on this movie, so I figured this was going to be a bad movie. Was it quite as bad as I was expecting? I guess not, but it's obviously still a garbage fire. So, obviously, I suppose the elephant in the room should be addressed first, and that's Ezra Miller. Now, even putting aside his criminal activity, he's still a terrible choice for Barry Allen. And it was proven that when Zack Snyder claimed that he casted Ezra Miller without an audition due to his performance in Perks of Being a Wallflower. And I will tell you this, that his character in Perks of Being a Wallflower sure as hell ain't like Barry Allen. So, yeah, so I can't even blame this movie for having Miller because, again, this movie has been stuck in development hell since, what, 2014, I think was when this movie was announced. It's gone through director after director after director. Like, it actually at some point had Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who wrote the Spider-Verse movies, and originally were directing solo, but they dropped out, and then a bunch of other directors and writers dropped out. Even at some point, I think Ezra Miller wrote a script at some point, which was rejected by the studio, obviously. And even some directors just completely turned down this movie, like Sam Raimi, Mark Webb, Jordan Peele, and even Ben Affleck himself rejected directing this film, despite being in it. So they eventually settled on Andy Muschietti, who's best known for the It movies. And there's been a lot of controversy around this movie, mostly surrounding Ezra Miller. But my problems with the people who are working on this movie extend past Ezra Miller, considering a lot of people working on this movie were trying to defend him, and even the costume designer, I think that's who it was, said that people will forget about his criminal activities once the movie comes out. Well, that's a load of bullshit, clearly, because this movie is set to flop big time. So, apparently there are 3 guaranteed things in life: death, taxes, and Ezra Miller being box office poison. So, yeah, because this movie's set for like $70 to $75 million domestically, and just to put that in perspective, 2 months, or not even 2 months ago, a month ago, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 made twice that in its opening weekend. And hell, 2 weeks ago, Across the Spider-Verse made twice that in its opening weekend. So, this movie's set, and especially since this movie's budget, while the studio's been saying that it's roughly $200 million, considering all the extensive reshoots, it's been highly speculated that this movie's budget could have ballooned up to $300 million, which would make it, obviously, one of the most expensive movies ever made, if not the most expensive. So, how was the movie itself? Well, like I said, it's not very good. And I guess the acting is the best place to start, because I already talked about how Ezra Miller's a terrible choice for Barry Allen. He's obnoxious. And they even make a point of saying that his younger self is even more obnoxious than his supposedly mature version. He's still annoying. His acting is so hokey and over the top that he doesn't ever feel like a real person. His acting is terrible. Michael Keaton, he's not in the movie as much as you think from how much he was whored out in the marketing. He's in maybe the second half of the movie, and that's it. And Keaton does fine. He probably has one of the better performances in the movie. I think the best performance came out of Ben Affleck, who's in the movie for all of 5 minutes and doesn't really do much. And, I lost my train of thought. Iris West shows up, and they do try to reference Zack Snyder's Justice League a couple times in this movie, and they do a really bad job of it, because it's almost like they're trying to reference it while also trying to keep to canon, and it doesn't work. Because if you know anything about that movie, you know it doesn't work in terms of canon with the other DCEU movies. It just doesn't fit. But, so they tried to have it both ways, and it was and it just didn't work. Sasha Callie plays, is it Cal or Callie? I don't know. She apparently went to the Daisy Ridley School of Acting, because every line she has maybe 30 lines in this movie. She's barely in it, despite also being hoarded out in the marketing. She's barely in this, and like I said, she has like 30 lines. Every line she has up until the final fight is very monotone, and then when it gets to the action sequence, she does nothing but scream her lines throughout the entire thing. And again, her character is just kind of pointless in this movie, and we'll get back to that when I talk about the final battle, because there's a lot I want to talk about with that. The special effects, as you've probably heard or seen, and if you've seen any of my videos, I've pointed this out several times, are fucking abysmal. And I saw the excuse that Muschietti gave, where he said the special effects were intentionally bad. Bull fucking shit. I am never going to believe a director who says that the special effects were bad on purpose. When this movie had a budget of roughly $300 million, or 200 at the bare minimum, I'm not gonna buy it. If the movie had a budget of like $45 to $50 million, actually it kind of looks that way, maybe I would have been a little more forgiving, and maybe I would have bought the excuse of maybe it looks a little janky on purpose. But the simple fact that you shoved $200 to $300 million into this movie just to intentionally make your CGI look like dog shit, I'm not going to buy that excuse. That's a piss-weak excuse for bad CGI. And again, and people who will defend that excuse are the same people that try to complain about Marvel CGI. And when it comes to that, they'll point out maybe a few shots from the movie that don't look that great, and try to say the movie is bad CGI. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness looked really good, except for that one green screen effect, and maybe the weird the third eye effect at the end of the movie, and they used those two shots to say that the CGI was bad. Or Thor Love and Thunder. It looked pretty good overall, but it had that one weird floating head incident that didn't look very good, so they used that as an excuse to say the CGI looked awful. Every effect in this movie is terrible. I guess the least abysmal effect was the lightning that trails him, which I did say in one of my other videos on this movie, that I was pretty sure that they changed the lightning to yellow just to differentiate the two Barry Allens during the fight. I'm still convinced that that's what happened, but apparently in this movie, it's this suit that makes his lightning yellow, because whenever he's out of this suit, his lightning's blue. Not sure how that works, and they're basically ripping off Savitar from the CW show, and trust me, we'll get back to that, believe it or not, because when he's in the suit, the lightning's white, but when he's out of it, it's still orange, so really, you want to rip off one of the worst villains in that show? Well, one of the worst villains from the pre-Eric Wallace era, let me put it that way. And that's something else, is that I'm kind of tired of talking about this character, because I've been reviewing the show since Season 7. I reviewed Season 7, I reviewed Armageddon, and I reviewed Season 8, then I reviewed Season 9, and I've done a couple other videos on that show, and then I've done videos on this movie, and now I'm just reviewing the movie. I'm just tired of talking about this character, unless they want to make something good. Like, if you want to give me like a good animated Flash movie or something. Just anything that has some semblance of quality to it. And I'll get back to the CGI in a bit when I go into spoilers, because I will go into spoilers a little bit, especially with the final, 30-40 minutes, because there's a lot I want to talk about there. But back to the CGI, one thing I want to talk is the two berries effect. That's another effect. That is a BS effect of saying that, oh, the CGI was bad on purpose. I swear to God, you can still see the outline of the two berries whenever they're on screen together. It's embarrassing, and it's unforgivable. The CW has been doing two of the same berries since 2015, and they did it so much better in 2015 than this $200 to $300 million movie could pull off in 2023. That's pathetic. The story itself is a half-assed interpretation of Flashpoint, and even Andy Muschietti said we shouldn't consider this an adaptation of Flashpoint. well, if that's the case, then why the hell did you adapt Flashpoint? And this movie tried to do something different with time travel just to make it seem like it's more... just to seem like it's more clever than it is. And again, I'll get back to that in a second. Or maybe I'll just get into it now, because I'm kind of done with the non-spoiler section. So if you haven't seen the movie and want to, I'm going into spoilers here. The way they do time travel is extremely stupid, and they even kind of poke fun at other versions of time travel where you create an alternate timeline. So essentially, how this movie does it, instead, this is the timeline. Instead of like having a future that's like this, where it kind of bends off. You have a line and then the future changes. Nope, instead it becomes like an X, a different future, a different past. And that doesn't make any fucking sense. Now, the way they explained it in both the Flashpoint comic and animated movie wasn't that great either. Essentially what the explanation was, when Barry breaks the sound barrier, it creates a sonic boom. When he breaks the time barrier, he creates a time boom, essentially, which was the excuse for why Thomas Wayne is Batman and why Bruce Wayne is dead, why the Atlanteans are at war with the Amazons, and how Superman ended up in Metropolis and was captured by the government. That doesn't work, and that already doesn't make sense. But at least it's a simple explanation. This one tried to get clever, tried to be creative, and it fell on its face. That does not... him going back in time to save his mother should not have an effect on anything before that. It doesn't explain how Superman never made it to Earth and said Supergirl did. It doesn't explain why there's an entirely different Batman here, because essentially him time traveling created the multiverse. I don't understand how that works, and the movie doesn't either. That's just their excuse to have Michael Keaton in this movie instead of Ben Affleck. But none of that makes any sense. Oh, and I forgot, the comedy in this movie is cringeworthy as hell. None of the jokes... there were a couple of jokes that were decent attempts early on, but overall the comedy is terrible. The opening scene in particular, where he's trying to save these essentially dolls of babies, they're so obviously not actually there, because the CGI, again, is that bad. Where because his blood sugar's low, he's literally eating while saving babies from falling out of a hospital. This isn't funny, this is just weird. I don't understand this. And then, something else I want to get to is the cameos in this movie. Well, cameos, because a lot of them are CGI. No, really. Recently, it was leaked online that a CGI Christopher Reeve cameo was in this, and it's just as disgusting as it sounds, because it's terrible, rubbery PS2 CGI. And there was also Helen Slater in there as well, because technically that 1984 Supergirl movie does take place in the same universe as the Christopher Reeve movies, and he was in fact supposed to have a cameo, but it got scrapped at the last minute. There's even a picture of Christopher Reeve's Superman in that movie. Then there's, of course, Nicolas Cage's Superman, which was revealed by Annie Muschietti. And again, it's crappy CGI. It's just more PS2 level CGI of him fighting a spider. It's nothing interesting. There's a Jay Garrick CGI cameo. Yeah, there was no place for Grant Gustin, yet there was place for shitty CGI Jay Garrick. And apparently there were more cameos that were scrapped due to improve the pacing. Yet the pacing in this movie is already bad. There are points where it's too quick, and there's other points where it's too damn slow. Especially during the final fight, where it seems to just drag. And especially just to shove in these cameos. Not sure what that was. So, I guess I should get to the... oh, and the ending with the George Clooney cameo that was leaked online as well. Yeah, Warner Brothers was building up this huge secret ending, and it's the worst Batman to ever appear on the screen. Yay. The final battle in this already has terrible green screens and bad CGI. But the fight itself is not good. Again, the fight choreography is not very good. Supergirl is literally just here to be constantly killed by General Zod. That's her entire role in this movie. She's just here to constantly be killed by General Zod. And technically, that's part of the reason why Michael Keaton's here, too, because he's one of the ones that keeps dying over and over in this whole time loop that they end up creating. And I do like the idea of younger Barry, like, trying to go back and save them and failing every single time. Although, again, that's another thing that was ripped off from the CW show when there was an episode where Nora tried to do that. And it's a cool idea, but it's not really taken advantage of. It doesn't help that the fight itself just sucks. And there's a point where younger Barry, like, he gets, like, what was it, like a piece of, like, the ship or something that I guess, like, jabbed in his arm, and he starts using it as a blade. And there's a point where, in rage, he, like, vibrates his hand with that through a Kryptonian, and it's supposed to be viewed like a bad thing, like him kind of going off the rails a little bit, and even by older Barry. Yet, literally 5 minutes ago, older Barry vibrated his hand through another Kryptonian soldier, killing him outright. So, I'm not sure why this is viewed as a bad thing when older Barry did the same thing just a few minutes ago. And it wasn't even out of rage, he just did it just to take him out, so what's the problem here? And again, the CGI is worse than the CW show. It looks ridiculous. Miller still looks ridiculous, running around, flailing his arms around like an idiot, and that stupid bat suit that was chopped up for younger Barry looks ridiculous still. And then there's Dark Flash. Yeah, I made an entire video on this. And it's even worse than I imagined, because from what it was looking like, it was a piss-poor attempt to adapt Black Flash, where essentially it's the enforcer of the Speed Force, who who goes out and kills speedsters that have screwed with the timeline. But that's not what this is. Instead, he actually knocks Barry out of the Speed Force early, so he ends up in the time period with his younger self, which causes the events of the movie to unfold. And never shows up again, shows up in, like, a brief nightmare that Barry's having, like, shows up for about a second, and then doesn't show up until the finale. And what the twist is that it's younger Barry after he's been going through this time loop over and over and over again until he's eventually created. And essentially, Dark Flash knocking the Flash out of the Speed Force was the point that causes his creation. Remember what I said about them ripping off Savitar? This is the exact same shit, and it makes even less sense. Again, it's the weird. It was explained in that show, like, the chicken and egg scenario. It's like, who came first? What came first? Was it the event where Dark Flash knocked him out of the times line, or the creation of Dark Flash? Which one comes first? And apparently neither, because this still doesn't make any sense. The backstory of this guy is rushed as hell. He's in the finale for all of 3 minutes, and he's just there just to show off all the cameos, which is fucking insulting. And I guess something else I guess I forgot to mention, General Zod. Michael Shannon, and I already don't like Michael Shannon anymore because he also was one who defended Ezra Miller. He decided acting was not a priority while on set, apparently, because he didn't bother to give any inflections. So, yeah. So, this Dark Flash thing just doesn't make any sense, and he's taken out ridiculously easily, too. Like, he's taken out in all of, like, 30 seconds. Or, hell, he's not even taken out. They do the thing where he tries to kill Barry, and younger Barry takes the stab instead, which ultimately kills Dark Flash. And I know the movie wants me to care, but considering how annoying this fucking character was, let him rot. So, and then they try to recreate the scene from the Season 1 finale of The Flash, where after Nora Allen is stabbed, Barry gets to talk to her one last time, revealing himself to be her son from the future and reassuring her that Henry and himself are ultimately okay. They try to do something similar here, where he talks to Nora one last time before changing everything back to the way it was. And it's not a terrible idea, but it's been done before and done much better. So, yeah, this movie's a fail, and again, the suit designs is something else I want to talk about. All of them look bad. The Batman suit looks fine, but I liked it more when it was more grungy and dirty in the original movie than being shiny and squeaky clean like it is in this movie. The Flash suit looks ridiculous, and it's partly the cowl that I did get used to eventually. It still looks weird, but I got used to it. It's the lack of a belt. The fact that there's no belt on this thing, it's just red all the way down to the boots. It looks weird. And then the Flash Batsuit looks ridiculous, and Supergirl's suit is just horrific to look at. Everything in this movie was a fail. The acting was a fail, except for Keaton and Affleck. The designs are terrible, the CGI is abysmal, and when they do the time travel CGI, they don't bother to use, like, actual, like, clips or anything. It's just a bunch of CGI people, and it's disgusting to look at, because it all looks like wax models, or like they're made of rubber or something. It's disturbing. So, this movie wasn't even pleasant to look at all. There was nothing pleasant about this 2-hour and 20-minute dumpster fire. I'm giving The Flash an F. I've been giving the show an F for the past 3 years, and the movie ended up following suit. Big shock. So, I'm just glad I'm done talking about this movie for now. This will have a film face-offs against Spider-Man No Way Home. Maybe next week, maybe the week after, depending on which one. But, yeah, I'm just glad this movie's out so I can be done with it, and I hope this movie loses a shitload of money. So I'll see you next time.